Oh, welcome. Welcome to my home. Please come in. Please grab a seat. You brought your children too. Wonderful. Welcome. I hope your Hanukkah is going well. Are you blessed this year? Are you seeing God at work? Welcome. Welcome to my home. Thank you for coming. I know many of you have come to my home before, and I'm so grateful to have you. Some of you, I don't recognize your faces, and allow me to introduce myself. My name is Joseph. I had the rare privilege, the unique privilege of adopting Jesus Christ as my own son and raising him. But you know, I've gotten ahead of the story a little bit. That's probably why you're here. You wanted to hear the story of how I became who I am, don't you? Well, you know, this story gets misappropriated a lot. You know what I hear all the time from people? I hear, wow, you must have been a heck of a young man for Jesus to be born in your home. You must have been pretty special for God to use you. Just ask Mary, you'll know that wasn't true. My story is a story instead of a man who starts small, but God can change from a man of duty into a man of devotion. And if you'll hear my story and if you'll come along on my journey, then maybe you can be that kind of person as well. But you know, I've gotten ahead of myself. Great-grandpa Eleazar always said that if you're going to start a story, that the place to start is the beginning. Of course it is. Like I said, my name is Joseph, and I'm a Jewish man. Well, all of my Jewish compatriots can trace their lineage back to Father Abraham through one of the patriarchs. But not every Jewish family can do like my family can. You see, not only am I a child of Abraham, not only am I a son of Judah, but I have the rare privilege of being a son of David. Through my family, God blessed the nation with a king. It's a great king. And not only was I a son of David, but I'm a son of King Solomon as well. You know King Solomon, of course. He's the greatest king that Israel ever had in terms of the size of his kingdom. Yeah, he had some tough times too. You know, Grandpa Nathan always just pounded into my head, son, you're a king. You may not have the throne, but you're a king. And you know, that's true in a lot of ways. I have royalty running through my veins. King David was a man of great faith, and I'm his son. You know, though, it's kind of funny. In case you didn't realize it, you're not in a palace. In case you didn't realize it, these aren't king's robes. In reality, these hands, they're not king's hands either. These are the hands of a carpenter. And the reason that they're that way is there's more than just King David in my past. There's a couple of skeletons in my closet as well. For every Ruth and Boaz, there's King Manasseh. I'm a son of Manasseh as well. Yeah, I know. I'm not proud of it either. You remember Manasseh in the book of Kings, right? Manasseh is the king that God said there has never been a more wicked man ruling over Israel. That's my great-grandpa. Not only him, but I have Jeconiah in my past. Yeah, I know. You know him too. You know that the prophet Jeremiah, God told Jeconiah that because of his wickedness, that my family would be cut off from the throne of Israel forever. So sure, Grandpa Nathan said, son, you're a king. But in reality, I'm just a nobody. I'm just a carpenter. I live in Podunk, Nazareth. I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm not in Jerusalem in a palace. I'm up in Nowheresville, putting together houses for people. You know, though, my dad, Jacob, he believed what Grandpa said. And what Grandpa said is this, that being a king is a state of mind, not a state of finances. It's not about where you live, but about how you live. And Grandpa pounded into my head from the time that I was a little boy the words that are recorded in the book of Deuteronomy about the king. In Deuteronomy, it says this in chapter 17, that the king, when he ascended to the throne, should make his own copy of the law. He had to write it out with his own hand so that he could study it every day and obey it so that it would go well with the people. And you know what Dad always told me? He said, son, you don't know what God is going to do with your knowledge of the law, so you live it out even though you're not ruling Israel physically. So I did. Now, granted, you guys maybe don't understand this, but do you know how expensive it is to make a copy of the law? It would cost me 5 years of my wages just to buy the paper. So, what Grandpa did for us is that 3 times a week we went down to synagogue and we studied the law. And we memorized it so that I could quote the whole stinking book to you. And I obeyed it. But really, honestly, as a young man, do you really think that I did it because I had some wonderful devotion? No, frankly. I did it because it was my duty. I did it because Grandpa Nathan wanted me to, and it got him off my back. Can you relate to that? Maybe you've gone to synagogue because mom or dad says you have to? That you've gone and done your worship thing and just gone through the motions and did all this stuff without really having a heart? Yeah, that's where I was too. I was a righteous man. I obeyed the law. I did what God wanted me to do, but just because I had to. And you know what? Grandpa said, sure, son, you're a child of David, but I didn't really feel like it. I felt like a child of Manasseh. I felt like a child of Jeconiah. I looked at these hands, and I didn't see a king. I saw a carpenter. And just like any other carpenter in Nazareth, I didn't want to have visions of grandeur. I didn't want to set myself up for failure. I just wanted to do what most young men wanted to do. I wanted to finish my apprenticeship. I wanted to get married. I wanted to settle down and raise a family and just live my life in peace. That sounds about right, huh? So I set about doing that, and I got to be a little bit older, and there was this really sweet girl in synagogue. And her family was right, and they were at synagogue all the time, and of course we were there every week because Grandpa wouldn't hear of it otherwise. And so I got a little closer to her, and I got to know her a little bit better, and guys, you can relate. She's kind of soft, and she kind of smelled nice. She was pretty. She was godly. She did the right stuff, and Dad was delighted to go and talk to her father and ask if we could be betrothed. Her father agreed, and we were betrothed in synagogue. Her name is Mary. You met her on your way in. And we were betrothed in synagogue before our whole family of Israel. Now, you've got to understand what it's like to be betrothed. In my culture, when someone is betrothed, it's not like a kind of a promise, maybe we're going to go through with this. When a couple became betrothed, they were legally married. They didn't live together. They kept their physical purity, and for an entire year, they showed their devotion to each other to the whole culture, to the whole city, by living apart and yet being devoted to each other. It gave the man a time to build a home, to establish himself financially, and to show everyone that he would be faithful only to his wife. So Mary and I set out on that. It was great. What a wonderful time of blessing as I look forward to the day where we could consummate our marriage and live under one roof as husband and wife. I may have just been a carpenter, but I was living just a little bit of the dream that I had. I remember the day that God started the change in me. That day really started when Mary's cousin, her old cousin Elizabeth, found out she was having a baby. And Mary said that she wanted to go to Elizabeth's town and help her have that baby, and that was perfectly understandable. So she went. It was okay, and she was gone a long time. Almost 3 months she was gone. And I waited for her and looked forward to the day that she'd come home, and I'd look out the window of my shop just waiting for her to come. And oh, I remember hearing her voice as she walked up to the back door of my shop the day she came home. I was so excited. But frankly, that was the day that God crashed my dreams around me. She walked in, and leading her was a bump. There was no hiding the fact that Mary was pregnant when she walked back in that door. My heart hit my feet. You can't imagine what I was feeling at that time. I was hurt. I was angry. I was sad. I was disbelieving. How could she do that to me? How could she ruin this? What would Dad say? What would all the people say? How could she give away the gift of her purity like that? How could she do that? I'd built this home for us, and she'd ruined it all by being unfaithful to me. And of course I asked her, I said, what did you do? How could you do this? And she blew my mind. She said very quietly, Joseph, you must believe me, but I've been faithful to you. The child who is in me is not the result of infidelity, but he has been put there by the Holy Spirit of God. Now let me ask you, Would you buy that story? Because I sure didn't. I mean, honestly, if your fiance comes to you, your betrothed comes to you and goes, hey, I'm pregnant, but no, it's cool. Is that going to fly in your home? Because it sure wasn't going to fly in mine. I was so hurt. I turned and walked out of my shop and left her standing there. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I walked around my home, this home that I'd built for the two of us. I walked around town. I couldn't sleep a wink. I was mad at Mary. I was worried. What would Dad say? What would Grandpa say? I brought shame on the family. I told you that I was like Manasseh, that I couldn't do anything right. And then you know what? I was mad at God. I said, what did I do? What did I do? I just obeyed your law. I just followed the feast calendar. I showed up in synagogue when I was supposed to. What do you want from me? How could you take this away from me? All I've ever asked from you was just a little home and a wife who would be faithful. And now you've taken that too. How dare you, God? How dare you? I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, the sun rose, and guys, I'm sure you can relate. I was so mad, I just threw myself into my work. I worked with vengeance that day. I broke a hammer that day. I busted some nails up that day. And guys, you know what I'm talking about. I had a little work therapy. That night, I got home, and I fell into bed, and I was so exhausted, I fell asleep. There was nothing I could do. I was emotionally drained. I was spiritually drained. I was physically drained. And I fell asleep. That's when God really started changing me. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't dream much, especially when I'm tired. I work with my hands. So when I sleep soundly. But that night, I got a visitor in my dream. Now, please don't think I'm weird. This didn't happen to me much. But an angel appeared to me. And people have asked me many times, what did the angel look like? The best thing I can say is, wow. He was kind of hard to describe. I knew he had a face, but I couldn't really tell you what it looked like. I knew he had a body, but it was hard to put words to. But when he was there, I knew this was no mere dream. And he looked at me, and he said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child that has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this, he said, has taken place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and she shall bear a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel. That's Aramaic for God is with us. Now, I woke up in a cold sweat. Do you blame me? And I was freaked out because now I really had a choice to make. Now, you got to remember, like I say, I wasn't some crazy spiritual giant. I was just a regular guy. I was obedient when I was supposed to. When people were watching, I had a reputation to uphold, but what? You want me to marry her? Do you know what that's going to cost me? Do you know what Dad is going to say? Do you know what Grandpa's going to say? What are they going to do in synagogue? They're going to kick us out. How many clients am I going to lose? I'm not going to have a business left. I won't even be able to provide for us. And then I realized something. Two things, but the first one was this. The words of the angel came back to my ear. First of all, he called me Joseph, son of David. See, I'd spent my whole life thinking I was a child of Manasseh. But he looked at me and he said, Joseph, you're a son of David. You are like David is deep down. You are a man of great faith. I sure hadn't acted like it, though. You see, the first lesson that I learned in my journey of faith is this. God didn't see me like I was as a young man. God saw me as the man I could be. He said, Joseph, son of David. And that rang in my ears. And then he said, son of David, I have a test of faith for you. That girl you're so angry at, she didn't lie to you. She told you the truth. Not only that, son, he spoke to my heart. You were so angry at me all day, but what you thought was a curse was in reality a great blessing. Because for you, I have the task of raising my son, not yours. Now, would you agree with me, especially you men, that when you find out you're going to be a dad, you kind of go, ah! Now think about this. When God says, I want you not to raise your son, I want you to raise my son. Ah! I was freaked out. Was I up to it? Could I do it? This would cost me everything. This would cost me my family. This would cost me my business. It would cost me my status in society, my reputation. Could I do it? And I wasn't sure because I'd never done it before. But I tell you what I did. I realized that what I had thought was a curse, God had wanted as a blessing. So I hit my knees. And I said, Lord, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, first of all, for doubting you. Second of all, Lord, please help me to make up with Mary because she's been honest. And she's a good and faithful woman. And Lord, I know I haven't been a good man. I know I haven't devoted my life to you. But from here on out, I will. And I got up off my knees, and I went and found Mary, and I wept like a baby and asked her to forgive me. Of course, she's a wonderful woman. You know her. She did. And we decided then and there that we would keep Mary living with her mom and dad until after the baby was born so that nobody would wonder if that was my baby. That everyone would know what was up. Did it cost me something? You're darn right it did. Oh man, you have no idea what the conversation with Papa Jacob was like. He said he hated me. You know what is even worse? He wouldn't accept my wife. He said she was a whore. And the most damaging of all is that baby, God with us, Messiah that God let me raise. He wouldn't accept as his grandson. It cost me my family. It cost me my business. Do you know how many people looked at me and said, you have no honor at all? I mean, I knew what I was supposed to do by the law. I mean, I could have pointed to the law, and that's what they kept doing. They kept pointing to Deuteronomy and saying, you're supposed to divorce her. You're supposed to send her away. She's a harlot. How was I supposed to say, but you don't understand. God told me particularly to show his mercy and that she is a good woman. They didn't get it. But that was my first step of faith. I went from a man then who just did what he was supposed to because it's what the book said, to at that point I was all in. I had to do what he said. I'd made the commitment that now it wasn't just a matter of being dutiful, that I'd follow God when I heard his voice. You think that's where the story ends. And yeah, we had a little respite there. We settled down. We had to go to Bethlehem from Nazareth because the Caesar called a census. And while we were down in Bethlehem, Mary gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. He was perfect. And I mean that. His name, just like the angel told us, we named him Jesus. We stuck around for a couple of days in Bethlehem. We had Jesus circumcised like we were supposed to. And we had to provide an offering for Mary for her purification. That's what Leviticus says. We were so poor. We had no business future. We couldn't even bring a lamb. We had to bring 2 turtle doves because we had nothing. We headed home to Nazareth and settled back in. You know, though, as much as it cost me, every time I looked into the eyes of that boy, it was worth it. Every time I hugged my wife close, and she said, I love you and I'm grateful for you, it was worth it. Yeah, we were broke. Yeah, we wondered some days where the meals would come from, but it was okay. The story keeps going, though. That's not the end of the story. Frankly, that's just the beginning. It wasn't too long after that we got a visit. There we were at work, and I'd just finished work for the day and had come home, and we had some royal dignitaries show up. 3 men from the east, and these guys were bucks up. I love little guys. These guys were wealthy. They showed up in the nice robes. They had camels. Do you know how much a new camel costs? And they came and they said, we've come to pay homage to the child. We've come to see the Son of David. Do you know what I heard there? I heard, an affirmation of what the angel said to me, that this was God's son, and I am David's son. And you know what else? They brought gifts. Sweet! They brought gold. They brought incense. They brought myrrh. This stuff's expensive. I mean, this isn't the cheap stuff. They brought expensive gifts. Finally, I said, I looked at Mary. I said, finally, we're not poor anymore. This is awesome. This is for Jesus. But hey, we're raising Jesus. We got to take care of the boy. Sweetheart, we have gold. We don't have to starve anymore. I can finally build us a home that's worthy of Messiah. I don't have to worry about the fact that these people won't let me work for them. We'll be okay. It'll be just fine. I finally have a little bit of the life of David, not just the blood of David. We went to bed that night so blessed. I felt like, wow, I finally got a little bit of prosperity. Finally got to break my way. Finally, the blessing of God was really upon me in a tangible way. And then I got another visitor. I was sleeping that night, and that angel showed up again, but there was a difference this time. When he came, there was fear in his eyes. There was fear in the eyes of an angel. Now, when you think of an angel, what do you think of? I think of powerful, of wise, certainly of confidence when we're talking a messenger of the Lord, right? This one was scared. He shook me and he said, "Get up, flee, for Herod wants to kill the boy. Get up." I shot out of bed. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't stay there. I had to get up. I said, "Mary, get up. Get up." She said, "Why?" I said, "We got to go." She says, "Where are we going?" "I'm not sure." What happened? I had another dream. The angel showed up. He showed up in my dream again. He said, "Egypt, we need to go to Egypt because Herod wants to kill Jesus. We got to get out of here." I ran out to the shop. I threw the pack saddle on our mule. I stuffed as much as I could into this pack saddle. I stuffed clothes in there. I stuffed as many tools as I could in there so that I could do business wherever we were. Mary bundled up the baby. And then I realized we were in trouble. We were in trouble because we had almost no food in the house. We didn't have anything. We had a few scraps from today's food. We had leaven for tomorrow's bread that we hadn't bought yet because we didn't have any money to. And we were in trouble. I couldn't go down to Jerusalem because that's where Herod was. I couldn't go to my family because they'd rejected me. We were in trouble. We were going to starve to death. And then, just as I was about to walk out the door, I went, "We have those gifts. We have the gold. We have the incense. We have the myrrh. Sweetheart, we'll be okay." I ran back in the house. I'd hidden them so that nobody would find them. I grabbed them up out of there and I threw them in the mule. And off we went. We practically ran. I mean, frankly, if you had heard a scared angel telling you to hightail it, would you just kind of mosey? Boy, I remember just as we were about to crest the hill, I turned back and I looked at my house. I built the house with my own two hands. I looked at my family and I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to be gone. I don't know when this is going to end. I want to reconcile with them so bad. I want to give them a chance to know Mary and Jesus. But I don't know if I'm going to get that now. Can I really go? We stopped at the top of the hill. And Mary looked at me and said, "Sweetheart, we got to go. It's time." So we turned, we headed west to the sea, and we skirted the Mediterranean all the way to Egypt. Now, come on, you're good, observant people. You know that Egypt doesn't have exactly wonderful memories of our people, right? Egypt's a bad place. And you know what? Remember, I'd had to memorize Deuteronomy 17, and just before that, the passage about the king memorizing the law, it said the king shall not go to Egypt to multiply horses for himself. He shall not go there to be wealthy. But we went to live. We picked up, and that gold that we had provided food for us. It provided fodder for the mule. It provided the clothes that we needed to make it through the winter. It provided for us to build a home down in Egypt. Now, on purpose, I built a house where there were no Jews. I stayed out of the way. We were in the middle of nowhere. We didn't know the language. We didn't know the customs. It was hard to find work because they built houses down there differently than we did. But you know what? God had given us those gifts. And as we were walking that first night, I was hand in hand with my wife. Do you know what I realized? What an amazing God I serve, who indeed, before I even knew that the need existed, provided what I needed to make it happen, that I could serve. I got to tell you, I wasn't looking to spend that money, those gifts on food and lodging and a new house. Well, maybe the new house. I was looking to have them for myself, but God used them instead for Himself. You know the lesson there, guys? The lesson that I've learned since many times over is this. Sometimes God provides for the need before the need shows up. He provided that for me. I bet you He'll provide the same for you. So next time something shows up in your life that you're not necessarily sure what it's for, don't spend it on stuff. Because next thing you know, you may be hightailing it. Better you than me. You know, our story didn't end there. Obviously, we don't live in Egypt anymore. But we settled in there for a while. I'll tell you, we had to learn some stuff while we were there. God changed me again. I mean, at this point, I was pretty much, I thought, a man of devotion. I thought that, hey, Lord, where you lead, I'll follow. I just didn't really want to stay in Egypt. Do you blame me? I didn't know anybody. It was strange. It was weird all the way around. I couldn't find work. All we had was each other. That was one of the biggest lessons that God taught me. You know what? I thought I needed my big, big, big family around me to have a joyful life. You know what I needed? I needed my wife and my baby boy. That's all we had. That was all that counted. And you know what? When we got in a fight, Mary couldn't run home to Mama. It was a long run. We had to stay together and work it out. When Jesus was great, but you know, we had more kids. And when the little ones started acting up, we couldn't just like drop them off at Auntie and Uncle's house. We couldn't go and say, how do I raise this child? We had to figure it out. God used that to draw us close to each other. That time, that alone time. Not only that, but remember I told you we settled in an area there weren't any Jews. We didn't have a synagogue. We couldn't have a reputation. We couldn't have the external observances. Do you know what I had to do? If I was going to raise God's son, I had to turn my home into a house of worship of God. You know, I know. You guys have heard the story of Jesus when he was 12 years old and he amazed the rabbis in the temple with his knowledge. He did. He's an amazing boy. And I'll tell you why he's amazing. It's because his mama sat every night in our home, taught him God's word. Sat in our home every night, told him the stories of Israel. And as he went to work with me every day, we followed what God said in Deuteronomy 6. And we talked of the Lord as we walked by the way, as we sat by the night, as we laid down to rest our heads. That's part of why Jesus is who he is. Now, yes, is he a special boy? No. But that didn't happen by accident. You know what was funny? God has a sense of humor, doesn't he? Has he ever had a sense of humor in your life? It was kind of funny because, of course, we were homesick, but I remember the day that after Mary had put the babies to bed, we were snuggled up and just talking, and she realized and said, you know, dear, I'm so blessed. I feel like God is with us. We may not have a synagogue, but we're worshiping Him here, just as a family. And you know what? Our home isn't in Nazareth. Our home isn't in Bethlehem. Our home is wherever God makes it. We'll follow Him there regardless. And I agreed with her. I said, sweetheart, wherever He calls, we'll go. Well, guess what? That night in a dream, I got another visit. Don't ever ask God for these visits, by the way. It's like asking Him for patience. Bad. And this time, the angel was happy. He looked at me and there was joy. And he said, Joseph, it's okay. Herod has died. Jesus is safe. You can go home now. Kind of funny timing, huh? But the minute that we decided we didn't need to be in Nazareth, God said, hey, I want you to go. Well, we didn't have any problems leaving Egypt. We were okay with that. We packed it up, took us a couple of days, and we headed home. Now, I wanted to settle in Bethlehem. And the reason I wanted to settle in Bethlehem, that was our ancestral home. That was where we were from, the city of David, the place of blessing of David's people. But But you know, when we got there, we realized that Archelaus was still reigning. He was reigning in Herod's place, and it wasn't very good. So God told me one more time, he said, no, son, head on back to Nazareth. I know it's Podunk, but it's where I want you to raise my son. So we headed back. We found our house still there, a little worse for wear after a couple of years without us, but we pitched it, put it back together. Built it again with my own two hands. Settled down to raise my kids. We've done okay, trying to get mom and dad to see their grandson. And things haven't always been easy. But you know, I can tell you that today, over the last 15 years, God changed me from a man of duty, who did what he did because he was supposed to a man of devotion, who got the privilege of raising God's son. Please hear the lessons of my life. First and foremost, you may not think that you're qualified to do God's work. You may not think you're good enough, that you're broken, that maybe it's your family history. Maybe it's your commitment to God so far. Maybe it's something else, your finances, your skills. Let me tell you this. I had none of that stuff when my story started. I was just a guy who didn't think he was anything. Do you know what I heard? You might have heard this maybe from your parents. That God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Secondly, don't let your lack of resources stand in the way of being obedient to God. And listen when he calls. You realize that the first step of obedience in my life built to the second one, to the third one, to the fourth one. That if it wouldn't have been for that first step of obedience, do you know who I'd be today? I'd be a Podunk carpenter in Nazareth, a son of Manasseh. But instead, I get to say for all time that my boy, my son, is Messiah. Thirdly, recognize that where God wants you and where he calls you, that's home. And whether you have a big family this year in your celebrations, or whether it's just a couple of you, thank God for the gift that he's given you and his son. Thank God for the many ways he's been at work in you. Thank you for coming to my home. May God bless you richly this year.